Welcome to Cut the Crop, keeping you in the know about everything you grow. Researchers, growers and other interesting folk delivering insights and information on topics ranging from agronomy to profitability. Brought to you by the Foundation for Arable Research.
Hello and welcome. My name's Alison Stewart and I'm your host of this session of Cut the Crop. And today we're talking to our resident maize expert, David Densley. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Alison. Great to be here.
Yeah. So you have been with FAR for 3 years and you came on board at a time when we were going through a major review of what we were doing in the maize space. And so it seems an opportune time to have a look back and sort of see, like, what have we been doing over the last 3 years and what's been the focus and what have we achieved? And so maybe let's just look back and say, what was our overarching maize strategy and the focus that we wanted 3 years ago?
3 years ago. So, yes, 3 years ago in September, I started with FAR. So when I first came on board, Alison, we just took a time to sort of take a step back. And so I engaged with the ARG and with the technical advisory group. And we sort of came together in a bit of a workshop. We talked about what our priorities might be for research moving forward, for maize research moving forward. And out of that, we formed we call this the pre-focus, okay? So the pre is an acronym. Yes. So the P stands for profitability. So our research needs to be focused on profitability. So how can we, through research, help maize growers be more profitable? Number one. The R is resilience. So in particular, resilience to climate change and extreme weather events. So how does our research then give us, or how can our research help us have better resilience within our production systems? And the third part of the pre is the environment. And of course, we know we can't leave the environment behind. We just can't. So our research also focuses on the environmental piece. So we can't be profitable at the expense of environment, and we can't actually have more resilience at the expense of the environment. They all are in partners. They're a three-legged stool, and they need to come together. So that's our overarching focus, if you like. So it's our pre-focus: profit, resilience, and environment.
Okay. So you then sort of framed that high level, sort of using your 5 pillars of maize research, which I know you love talking about.
Yes, indeed I do. The 5 pillars of research. I mean, it's got a ring about it, hasn't it? And so we split then our research into these 5 pillars, one of these 5 pillars. And so we can see on the screen, Alison, the five pillars, and they're all in different colours. And so the first one is around strip till and no-till systems development. So we've been as maize growers and in fact all arable growers here in New Zealand, right? We've been using cultivation for a long time as a part of our maize establishment, as our crop establishment system, and that's also the case in maize. And so we know what good practice looks like from a cultivation perspective. But what does it look like from a strip till and no-till perspective, Alison? So should we even be considering strip till and no-till in the first instance, right? And what's the advantages of that over cultivation and some of the considerations? And what does good practice look like from those two? Because if we really know how to do that in cultivation, we need to understand what good practice looks like and will look like in the future for strip till and no-till. So first pillar, strip till and no-till systems development, good practice, understanding the differences between that and cultivation, and then how the strip till and no-till can help us with the profitability, resilience, and environmental piece. The second one is precision ag. So these all tie, the 5 pillars all tie together. So the second one is around precision ag. the precision ag space is moving rapidly, right? So it's just the technology. We know as just consumers, and we go home and we buy something new, and you turn it on and it's like all this technology comes at you. Well, likewise with precision ag and farming, it is evolving rapidly. So we've got our second pillar is around precision ag. So and we're just looking at how that can help us on farm. So that's the second part. The third one is defining and managing greenhouse gas emissions, as you can see. So in the 5 pillars are on the screen now. So that's the center one. Now, we're not doing anything per se in the greenhouse gas emissions right now. Nevertheless, that's a pillar that in the future we can, look at and do some work on that. So there's only so many things we can do in our research program in maize, both from a logistics point of view and the money that we've got to spend in that. But nevertheless, it needs to be one of our pillars, and it just sits there.
And the growers, even though we're not necessarily doing underpinning research at the moment, we are supporting growers in at least understanding what their emissions profile is.
Yes, and that's a good point. And some of that research has been done to try and understand what a standard emissions look like from a maize grower. What happens when you bring livestock in? What happens if it's mixed? So that's right. That's right. Now, I don't want to confuse the defining and managing greenhouse gas emissions with nitrogen manager. That's separate, but this is a greenhouse gas one. The fourth one is integrated pest and weed management. Again, that's one that we're not doing much in now. Nevertheless, it needs to remain in the 5 pillars, I think, because it's an important part as we go important area as we go forward with limited amount of pesticide options and with resistance coming in. So that's the fourth one.
And just to remind growers that we do actually do a lot in the biosecurity space to try and keep pests and diseases and weeds out of New Zealand. And we've had, a particular focus in maize.
With fall armyworm.
Yes.
That's right. So that's absolutely right. So this sort of, all that background work is really, really critical because someone's got to do that, Alison. And in fall armyworm, we've already had some early outbreaks in Northlands. So, that's a pest that needs to be constantly on our radar. So that's the fourth one. And so moving forward, we may in the future say, well, we want to put some research money into different controls for fall armyworm, for example. We may choose to do that in the first instance. But back to your point, currently it's around so monitoring and making farmers aware that, here's the population load and here's the flight patterns and so on. So that's a good point. So that's the fourth one. The fifth one is everybody likes talking about cover crop. So cover crop integration into a maize production system. Now, the word cover crop is quite generic in its context. So it basically means a winter crop. Now, if you're a maize silage grower, you're already doing a cover crop. It's called ryegrass. You're planting an annual ryegrass, and so you're doing maize, ryegrass. In this case, we're looking at some novel winter crops, different winter crops. And so they can be things like, faba beans and vetch and clover and some of those other things. And so we're looking at those as well and how they integrate into the strip till and no-till production system. So marry them together. Is there some advantages from a profitability, from a resilience, and from an environmental perspective? So there are 5 pillars.
Yeah.
Alison.
Good. And we're not doing this in isolation of the rest of the people in the industry. I mean, a lot of this work is in collaboration.
It is in collaboration. So, collaboration allows the dollars to go further, doesn't it? And so it makes sense that we do the collaboration with, people, the different folks that have got a particular interest in an area. So
yeah. And you talk about sort of, identifying, good management practice in these various areas. But of course, that good management practice may differ depending on the region that you're growing the maize in. And what works well for one region may not necessarily be the best practice for another region.
And that's one of our challenges, Alison, because, we've got a limited finance to do research, and most of our research is centred in the Waikato. And, we would love, and I want to be clear on this, we would love to be doing maize research in all the regions. I think that would be ideal, but we can't do that. So we then, most of our research, as I mentioned, is in the Waikato, but we always have a lens across the other regions. Okay, so we trying to look at our research on different soil types, Alison, and what sort of response we might get to that soil type. Climate, but will have an influence. And one of the big projects, major research projects that we are focused on in the South Island, for example, and in the cooler regions is Narrow. So Narrow research. So in February, we were blessed enough to have Professor Fred Below down into New Zealand. Now, it was quite a coup. Fred actually says no to more invitations than he accepts. And Fred's been doing that work on population by row width. Okay, so as we lift up the population, we then crowd our plants. And so, our standard row width is 76 centimetres, or 75 centimetres. That's standard practice right across New Zealand, from Northland through to south, down the southern part of the maize growing regions in the South Island. And so, can we narrow up the row from 76, say, to 50 centimetre and increase our population? So what we do is we capture more sunlight more quickly, and we're converting that sunlight into energy. And so that's an important piece of research that I'm strongly behind. We have to do that really right, because if our research says, yes, it makes sense to narrow up the row, then contractors and farmers have to go out and invest in new infrastructure, in new equipment, right? So we absolutely have to be confident that, yes, there are some economic yield gains to narrowing up the row. That is a project that's ongoing, and that's what we're doing down here in the South Island as an example of one of the projects.
Yeah. So we're 3 years in. What have we achieved?
Yes, and so doing research for research sake doesn't mean anything. It's got to be applied on farm. So you've got to be able to, here's some of the research, this is what it's suggesting, and then look at it on farm. So we mentioned two of our 5 pillars are the strip till, no till, versus compared to cultivation, and the other one is cover crop. So we've got on-farm research sites now, in the Waikato, in the greater Waikato, so in Hauraki, and then in eastern and western Waikato, where these are long-term sites where we're doing cultivation, no-till and strip-till in the same site on an annualised basis. We're doing different cover crops behind that. And we're measuring a range of different outcomes from that, Alison. And coming back to that pre-focus, so of course we're measuring the profitability from the different systems. We're measuring the resilience. So, for example, can no-till with a clover, provide us more? Those soils store more water over the wintertime for our crop in the summertime? So can it deliver some profitability advantages? And then we look at soil compaction. We look at what's going on with the planter when we do those different plant our maize into those different cover crops and maize establishment systems. We understand we're learning all that. So that hasn't answered your question. What we've learned there is that planter setup, and we probably already knew this, but we can actually start to define that on a piece of paper now, Alison. So your planter really is a critical part. So with strip till, for example, do we put fertilizer in with a strip till? And if we do, how much do we put in? What type do we put in? And what depth do we put in? Put the fertilizer in? Is there some advantages in banding fertilizer versus broadcasting? Some of that is what Fred Below talked about in February as well. Now, that's a journey. Okay, so if you're going to switch from conventional cultivation to no-till, you have to give yourself some time, 3, 4, 5 years. So we're only starting to really pull some good data out of this. So yes, we can share our experience. We can also mention here's what you need to watch out for as a farmer if you want to transition to strip till or no-till. That's what we can say, but it is still a journey of discovery, and that will be for some time. And we also have field days because there's nothing like going there and looking at it and touching it and feeling it and seeing for yourself some of the challenges and some of the benefits of doing these type of practices. So that's that. Nitrogen, we've done a lot of work in this nitrogen space. And based on that research, I can say with a reasonable amount of confidence that we are over, as a generalization, we're over applying nitrogen, meaning that there's more nitrogen in the soil than what we realize. So going out and measuring that nitrogen before you apply your nitrogen fertilizer makes a lot of economic sense. It ticks two boxes: profitability and the environmental piece, right? Because if we put every kilo of nitrogen less that we apply, it's less nitrous oxide we're putting into the atmosphere. So we've done some really, really good work in that space. Where you sample, so you collect those samples out in the field, where you sample those, how you take samples is also really important, Alison, because if you just take a transect and have one sample for the paddock, and it says there's this much nitrogen in there, as researchers, we know that there's always this spread, right? Yeah. And so how you sample becomes important. And so those things that we can talk about as well. We've got some really good information there. So that's a journey. It's a journey where there's some really solid stuff that farmers can grab hold of and apply now, or try it, Alison. I get the fact that if you've been doing something for 10 or 15 or 20 years, and you're happy with that, someone comes along and says, well, why don't you change that? Why don't you give this a try? And we'd say, give it a try rather than, you don't have to do the whole paddock. You just...
Yeah, that's right. Because, although, a maize system may not necessarily be as diverse as some of the other arable systems, it is still a system. And if you make one change, you have to understand how that might impact other things that are happening on the farm.
No, that's right. That's right. I mean, as maize growers, the maize industry is nowhere near as complex as some of these systems down in the South Island, for example, where they can have several crops. We get it pretty easy, really, but it's challenging the paradigm, Alison. So if we're growing maize today like we did 15 years ago, I think we're missing some opportunity. We certainly know that the yield advantages from genetic gains has gone on over those 10 or 15 years, and that is significant. Are we realizing that? And if we're not, then maybe it's time for us to review what we're doing, and that's where our research is focused on, to challenge the paradigm and to challenge the farmers and the maize industry to try some of these new ideas.
So, obviously you've mentioned the areas that we're focusing on at the moment. What are our plans as we move forward for the next 3 or 4 years? Are we going to be picking up a focus on some of the other pillars?
That's a good question. So, you know better than I, Alison. So we're guided by ARG, right? So ARG, then our farmer and advisory group, they give us direction on where they want to see the research. These on-farm sites that we've got, I think they're very important. They need to, in my view, carry on. Right, because it could be 5 and 10 years before we start to see some differences there. I know our farmers that we've got the sites on want us to be on that journey. They are totally convinced about this, and they say, we want you here for as long as you can. As far as some of these other areas, I think precision ag there's always something new coming out there. So who knows what in 3 years' time what precision ag research we need to be doing. Okay, so that I can't answer that. All I know is that there will be something new out there that we need to consider. Managing greenhouse gas emissions and the integrated pest and weed. Yeah, look, I think they're two areas that I think we need to be doing more work in as budget and time allows us to do that.
Yeah. And we know that in our upcoming maize conference that we're going to have in February, we're going to have a session looking at biologicals, and we've got an international speaker coming in, and we've also got a session on precision ag. So, hopefully we'll start getting some, ideas, from collaborators overseas around some opportunities that we might be able to explore.
Look, and I think the biologicals is a good point. Because we can eat the farm maize planter, we've got a very, very smart maize planter, as we should have, because if we're going to do research into these things, we've got to have fit for purpose equipment. We can very easily do these biological trials with our maize planter. Very, very easy. We've certainly got the technology to be able to do that. So that's one area. So whether that biological is going to help us reduce our nitrogen, or it's going to enhance our soil biology, who knows? I think one of our challenges is going to be, Alison, we've probably got a list of 50 different products if we could bring them into the country. Yeah. Who knows? Maybe 100 different products. And so which ones do we? Can't try them all. No. So which ones do we do?
That's right. Well, there are some that it would be challenging for us to be able to bring in just because of the regulations that we have. And that, that's frustrating. But there's a lot of work going on in that space overseas, and we just need to keep an eye on it and identify the ones that are the best fit, to bring into New Zealand and collaborate with the relevant companies. So I think that area is going to become, a real hotbed of R&D and evaluations. So if you're a maize grower, do you think that FAR is on the right journey and starting to deliver value for the maize growers?
I'm biased.
Yes,
okay?
Yes, you are, and I'm biased as well.
And we put it out on the table. Yeah. Look, I think if the farmers that are attending the field days and listening to some of our research, I think if we asked them, they would say absolutely. In fact, I'm confident they would say that, Alison. One of our challenges and one of our ongoing challenges is to engage other maize growers that don't know much about FAR. They've got a view on FAR, and they need to come along to see what we're doing and judge for themselves. Because to answer your question, yes, I believe what we're doing is right for the time, and it will help with profitability, resilience with climate change, and help with the environmental piece as well.
Yeah. And I'm completely aligned with you. I think that we are, but our challenge is to convince growers who are not engaged with FAR at the moment to come along and listen and see what we're doing. And if they don't necessarily think that we're doing all of the right things, then give us feedback.
They can say so. They say so. I guess our challenge is, Alison, almost certainly they won't be listening to this podcast, those people.
I know. It's so damn frustrating. But never mind. We've just got to get out there. And it comes back to the growers talking about the value that they get from FAR to other growers. We can talk, till the cows come home. It's actually the grower down the road talking to his neighbour and saying, hey, I've done this on my farm, and it was based on something that, research that FAR did. And the more that we have that, the more opportunity we've got to make those changes and I suppose get our profile a little bit more widespread.
And the other people that are really important here are the rural professionals as well, because the rural professionals are speaking into the farmers. Yeah. And so having the rural professionals come along and look at what we're doing so they stay abreast of some of the research so they can help their farmers as well.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much, David. Always a pleasure. And thank you very much, listeners. Have a great day on the farm.
Thanks for tuning in to Cut the Crop, presented to you by FAR. If you'd like to know more about any of the topics discussed or have any suggestions for future topics, go to www.cutthecrop.co.nz.